I'm Tarot Oracle, and this is the Charles Dickens Tarot 4K flip through. I thought it would be appropriate to play a free audiobook of David Copperfield while we do the flip through. So here we go.
After some quarter of an hour's absence, he returned. "Well," said my aunt, taking the cotton out of the ear nearest to him. "Well, ma'am," returned Mr. Chillip, we are progressing slowly, ma'am." "Bah," said my aunt, with a perfect shake on the contemptuous interjection, and corked herself as before. Really, as Mr. Chillip told my mother, he was almost shocked. Speaking in a professional point of view alone, he was almost shocked. But he sat and looked at her, notwithstanding, for nearly 2 hours, as she sat looking at the fire, until he was again called out. After another absence, he again returned. "Well," said my aunt, taking the cotton out of that side again. "Well, ma'am," returned Mr. Chillip, we are progressing slowly, ma'am." "Ah," said my aunt, with such a snarl at him that Mr. Chillip absolutely could not bear it. It was really calculated to break his spirit, he said afterwards. He preferred to go and sit upon the stairs in the dark and in a strong draught until he was again sent for. Ham Peggotty, who went to the National School, and was a very dragon at his catechism, and who may therefore be regarded as a credible witness, reported next day that, happening to peep in at the parlour door an hour after this, he was instantly descried by Miss Betsy, then walking to and fro in a state of agitation, and pounced upon before he could make his escape. That there were now occasional sounds of feet and voices overhead, which he inferred the cotton did not exclude, from the circumstance of his evidently being clutched by the lady as a victim on whom to expend her superabundant agitation when the sounds were loudest. That, marching him constantly up and down by the collar, as if he had been taking too much laudanum, she at those times shook him, rumpled his hair, made light of his linen, stopped his ears as if she confounded them with her own, and otherwise tousled and maltreated him. This was in part confirmed by his aunt, who saw him at 12:30, soon after his release, and affirmed that he was then as red as I was. The mild Mr. Chillip could not possibly bear malice at such a time, if at any time. He sidled into the parlour as soon as he was at liberty, and said to my aunt in his meekest manner, "Well, ma'am, I am happy to congratulate you." "Upon what?" said my aunt sharply. Mr. Chillip was fluttered again by the extreme severity of my aunt's manner, so he made her a little bow and gave her a little smile to mollify her. "Mercy upon the man, what's he doing?" cried my aunt impatiently. "Can't he speak?" "Be calm, my dear ma'am," said Mr. Chillip in his softest accents. "There is no longer any occasion for uneasiness, ma'am. Be calm." It has since been considered almost a miracle that my aunt didn't shake him, and shake what he had to say out of him. She only shook her own head at him, but in a way that made him quail. "Well, ma'am," resumed Mr. Chillip as soon as he had courage, "I am happy to congratulate you. All is over now, ma'am, and well over." During the 5 minutes or so that Mr. Chillip devoted to the delivery of this oration, my aunt eyed him narrowly. "How is she?" said my aunt, folding her arms with her bonnet still tied on one of them. "Well, ma'am, she will soon be quite comfortable, I hope," returned Mr. Chillip. "Quite as comfortable as we can expect a young mother to be under these melancholy domestic circumstances. There cannot be any objection to your seeing her presently, ma'am. It may do her good." "And she, how is she?" said my aunt sharply. Mr. Chillip laid his head a little more on one side, and looked at my aunt like an amiable bird. "The baby," said my aunt, "how is she?" "Ma'am," returned Mr. Chillip, "I apprehended you had known. It's a boy." My aunt never said a word. She took her bonnet by the strings in the manner of a sling, aimed a blow at Mr. Chillip's head with it, put it on, bent, walked out, and never came back. She vanished like a discontented fairy, or like one of those supernatural beings whom it was popularly supposed I was entitled to see, and never came back any more. No, I lay in my basket and my mother lay in her bed, but Betsy Trotwood Copperfield was forever in the land of dreams and shadows, the tremendous region whence I had so lately travelled, and the light upon the window of our room shone out upon the earthly bourne of all such travellers, and the mound above the ashes at the dust that was once he, without whom I had never been. End of chapter 1. Copperfield. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Ty Times. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Chapter 2. I observe. The first objects that assume a distinct presence before me as I look far back into the blank of my infancy are my mother with her pretty hair and youthful shape, and Peggotty with no shape at all, and eyes so dark that they seem to darken their whole neighbourhood in her face, and cheeks and arms so hard and red that I wonder the birds didn't peck her in preference to apples. I believe I can remember these two at a little distance apart, dwarfed to my sight by stooping down or kneeling on the floor, and I going unsteadily from the one to the other. I have an impression on my mind which I cannot distinguish from actual remembrance, of the touch of Peggotty's forefinger as she used to hold it out to me, and of its being roughened by needlework, like a pocket nutmeg grater. This may be fancy, though I think the memory of most of us can go farther back into such times than many of us suppose.